Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees of Raman Kendra Delhi for Sunday Satsang with Raghavji. I shall now request Narayananji at the shrine of Raman Kendra to initiate with puja. Narayananji.
स्टार्ट अच्युताय नमः अनंताय नमः गोविंदाय नमः शुक्लां वरदरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्याये सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये अयमूर्त समुसद्दोषितं बन्धो महन्तो नो कृणन्तो अयमूर्त समुसद्दोस्तु तदेव लग्नं सदिनं तदेव ताराबलं चन्द्रबलं तदेव विद्याबलं दैवबलं तदेव लक्ष्मीपते ते ग्रीं स्मरामि ओम भू ओम भुव ओम सुव ओम मह ओम जन ओम तव ओम सत्यम ओम तत्सौदर्वणीयम भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् ओम आबज्योतिषा अमृतं ब्रह्मोत्सरम् ममोपात समस्त दुर्द शात्वारासि परमेश्वर प्रीत्यर्थम करिष्यमाणस्य कर्मण निर्मेण प्रचतम आदौ विघ्नेश्वर पूजां करिष्ये पृथ्व्या मेरुटुरसी सूर्यं चंद्रकर्म देवता पृथ्वी दिया त्रिदा लोकादेशं विष्णुनाथुदा स्वयं स तारे मां देवी गुप्तरं गुरुशासनम् आगमार्थं तु देवानां कमनाथं रक्षाचां कंडारवं करामि यादव देवदेवानलाञ्जनम् ममोपात समस्त दुर्द शैत्वाराशि परमेश्वर प्रीत्यर्थम निर्बुद्धा सिद्ध्यर्थम आदौ विघ्नेश्वर पूजां करिष्ये गणानां गणपतिं नमामहे कविं कवीनां सत्रमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पति आनुशृणुपुष्टि साधनम् अस्मिन् दरिद्राबिम्बे महागणपतिं ध्यायामि महागणपतिम् आवाहयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः आसनं समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः अर्घ्यं समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः पाद्यं समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः आचमनीयं समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः औपचारिकतां समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः स्नानानन्तरम् आचमनीयं समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः वस्त्रदातम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः यज्ञोपवीतार्थम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः गन्धां धारयामि समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः गन्धोपरि अक्षतां समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः अङ्गनाथम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः हरिद्रा कुङ्कुमं समर्पयामि ओम महागणपतिये नमः पुष्पैः पूजयामि ओम सुमुदाय नमः ओम एकदन्ताय नमः ओम कपिलाय नमः ओम गजगर्णकाय नमः ओम लंबोदराय नमः ओम विघटाय नमः ओम विघ्नराजाय नमः ओम विनायकाय नमः ओम धूमकेतवे नमः ओम गणाध्यक्षाय नमः ओम बालचंद्राय नमः ओम गजाननाय नमः ओम वक्रतुंडाय नमः ओम शूर्पकर्णाय नमः ओम एरंबाय नमः ओम स्कंदपूर्तिवाय नमः ओम सिद्धविनायकरे नमः ओम शंकरमोक्ष विनायकरे नमः ओम आतुपुर विनायकरे नमः ओम महागणपतिये नमः नानाविध परिमलपत्र पुष्पाणि समर्पयामि। धूपार्थं समर्पयामि दीपार्थं समर्पयामि अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम भूर्भुवस्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। देवसवितुर्वरेण्यं सत्यं दोर्दन्यं प्रसञ्जामि अमृतस्वं नो स्वाहा। ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा, ओम अपानाय स्वाहा, ओम ज्ञानाय स्वाहा, ओम उदानाय स्वाहा, ओम समानाय स्वाहा, ओम ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा। महागणपतिये नमः, महागणपतिये नमः, महागणपतिये नमः। कुलकण्ठादिरसं नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि, मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि, अमृतं संतृप्तावधं समर्पयामि, कर्पूरं समर्पयामि। नमो नमो गणेशाय नमस्ते विष्णुर्णे निर्विघ्नं कुरुमे कार्यं नमामि गजानन अभिजानपद्मार्कं गजाननमार्मिकम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानाम् एकदन्तम् उपास्महे। महागणपतिये नमः, महागणपतिये नमः, महागणपतिये नमः। कर्पूरं समर्पयामि, नीराजनं समर्पयामि, नीराजनानन्तरम् आसमनीयं समर्पयामि। वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। गणपति प्रसादं सरसा कृणामि। ओम भो ओम भुव ओम शुभ ओम मह ओम जन ओम तव ओम सत्यम ओम तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ओम ज्योतिर्समृद्धं ब्रह्मस्वरम् मम पात समस्त दुर्द षट्पर की परमेश्वर प्रीत्यर्थम शुभे शोभने मूर्ते आद्य ब्रह्मण द्वितीय परार्थे श्रीवेदे वराकल्पे वैवस्वतमन्वन्तरे अष्टाविंशतितमे कलियुगे प्रथमे पादे जम्बूद्वीपे भारतवर्षे भरतखण्डे मेरो दक्षिणे पार्श्वे सगाप्ते अस्मिन् वर्तमाने व्यापावृक्ये प्रभादिनां षष्ट्या संवत्सराणां मध्ये शुभकृतुनाम संवत्सरे उत्तरायणे यमंत ऋतु मकर मासे शुक्लपक्षे प्रथमे तिथियां शुभतिथौ भानुवासर युक्तायां श्रवण नक्षत्र युक्तायां शुभ नक्षत्र शुभ योग शुभ कर्ण एवं गुण विशेषण विशिष्टायां अस्यां प्रथमे तिथियां शुभतिथौ मम जन्मापप्रति एतच्चरपर्यन्तं मध्ये सम्भाविधानं सर्वेषां पापानं सत्य अभिनवत्तम् अस्माहं सहकुटुम्बानं क्षेमसत्तर्य वीर्यविजय आयुरारोग्य ऐश्वर्याणाम् अभिवृद्ध्यर्थं समस्तमङ्गलाभ्यर्थं समस्तदुर्दोपशान्तयर्थम् अर्थं रमण महर्षि प्रसादेन ज्ञानवैराग्यसिद्ध्यर्थं श्री रमण महर्षि पूजां करिष्ये। तदंगम कल सब पूजा स करिष्ये। विघ्नेश्वरं यथास्थानं प्रतिष्ठापयामि। सोमनाथे क्षेमाय पुनरागमनाय च कलशस्य मुखे विष्णुखण्डे रुद्र समाधिस्थ मूले तत्र चतुर्थ ब्रह्मा मातृमणे समृता कुशौ सागरा सर्वे सप्तत्रिभुवा सुंदरा ऋग्वेदो यजुर्वेदो सामवेदो अथर्वण गंगे सतग्न सर्वे गोदावरी सरस्वती नर्मदे सिंधु कावेरी जलेस्मिन् सन्निधं कुरु अंगै सतैता सर्वे कलशाम्बु समाधिस्थ आयात देव पूजार्थं दुर्दशकारका तंबूरा सागरोत्पन्नो विष्णु विष्णु करे देव पूजिते पांचनीय नमोस्तुते देवो देवालय प्रोक्त जीवो देव स्नानन अंजान निर्माल्यम सोया भवने पूजये। ओम सकल गुणात्म संचिता योग पीठात्मने नमः आधार शक्तिये नमः मूल प्रकृतिये नमः आदिवराय नमः आदिकूर्माय नमः अनंताय नमः पृथ्व्यै नमः आदित्यादि नवग्रहदेवताभ्यो नमः दश दिग्बालेभ्यो नमः गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरा गुरुसाक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ओम अस्य श्री प्राणप्रतिष्ठा मंत्रस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वरा ऋषिरेख सामधर्वाणी संतांसी सकल जगत स्थिति सम्मार्गारणी प्राणशक्ति परादेवता आम बीजम हरिम शक्ति क्रोम कीलकम प्राण प्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आम अंगुष्ठाभ्याम नमः हरिदर्जनीभ्याम नमः क्रोम मध्यमाभ्याम नमः आमनाभिवाभ्याम नमः हरिदर्शिकाभ्याम नमः क्रोम कर्णपुष्ठाभ्याम नमः हरिम शिरसे स्वाहा क्रोम सिगाय वसट आम कौसायम हरिम नेत्रदाय वसट क्रोम वस्त्रदाय पट पूर्व दिग्बंध ध्यानम रक्तां बोधिस्थ बोधोलस तरुण कराब्जे पासं गोदंडम विक्षुत मणिमण पंचमाना विप्राण सुख कवालंत नरसता पिनव सोरवटिया देवी बाला लोरना बहुसुगरी प्राण शक्ति परान ओम आम हरिम क्रोम क्रोम हरिम हम यम रम लम वंशम सम हंस सोहम सोमंस अस्यामूर्तौ जीवदृष्टुदु अस्यामूर्तौ सर्वेन्द्रियाणि वाङ्मनस्वस्त्र दिव्या प्राणवाक् पाणिपाद पायुपुस्तानि याकस्ति स्वस्ति सुखं सुरं दृष्टन्तु स्वाहा। ओमास्यति प्राणवष्टामन्तस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वरा ऋषिरेखजित्सामधर्माणि संतांसि सकल जगत स्थिति सम्मार्गारणी प्राणशक्ति परादेवता आम बीजम हरिम शक्ति क्रोम कीलकम प्राणपुष्ठापने विनियोग आम अंगुष्ठाभ्याम नमः हरिदर्जनीभ्याम नमः क्रोम मध्यमाभ्याम नमः आमनाभिवाभ्याम नमः हरिघनिष्ठिकाभ्याम नमः क्रोम कर्णपुष्ठाभ्याम नमः आम शिरसाय नमः हरिम शिरसाः क्रोम सिगाय वसट आम कौसाय हरिम नेत्रसाय वषट क्रोम वस्त्रदाय पट पूर्व दिग्बंध असुनीदे पुनस्पाक्ष सक्त पुर प्राणवीनो देवोगम जो पश्ये में सूर्य मुचंद मुनमुदे बड़े सुक्ति आवाहिदो भव सद्दाविदो भव सन्नीदो भव सन्नीदो भव अवगुंडिदो भव सुब्रतो भव सुब्रसन्नो भव सुमुखो भव वरदो भव प्रसिद्ध प्रसिद्ध स्वामी सर्वजगन्नाथ यावत् पूजावसानकम तावत् ध्रुव पृथ्वीराजेन पिंबेस्मिन् सन्निधं गुरु ಅದು ನೈವೇದ್ಯ ಮಾಡೋಣ ओम भूर्भुवस्सुः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् देवसवितं स्वसत्यं तर्जेन प्रसन्नामि अमृतों स्वाहा ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा ओम अपानाय स्वाहा ओम व्यानाय स्वाहा ओम उदानाय स्वाहा ओम समानाय स्वाहा ओम ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः उडगंड इनिपुमंड नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि अमृतं समर्पयामि नीराजनं समर्पयामि नीराजनं मासमनियं समर्पयामि। चतुर्नदी मंत्र पौलसी पुत्र लक्ष्मी प्रसिमान प्रिय ईश्वरा रिसाइट भगवान रमणो स्तोत्र अपार सच्चि सुवारी राशोर्य चोर्विमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं युवायुधं ब्रह्मं कबीरं इंदाविनं निर्दिशयामि ओम महातेन महोतेन जाताय नमः ओम श्री रमणाय नमः ओम गुरवे नमः ओम अखंड संविदागराय नमः ओम मौजसे नमः ओम कारणोद्भवाय नमः ओम जगद्गीतावताराय नमः ओम श्री भूमिनाथात्तलोतिदाय नमः ओम पराशर कुलोत्तंसाय नमः ओम सुंदरात्तवक्फलाय नमः ओम कमनीय सुचारित्राय नमः ओम सयाय वासयायवते नमः ओम शोणासुतमोलीन मानसाय नमः ओम स्वर्णस्तगाय नमः ओम श्रीमद्वादशान्त महास्तरे लप्त विद्योदयाय नमः ओम महाशक्ति निवादेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः ओम परमार्थविदे नमः ओम दिव्यराय नमः ओम पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः ओम इंदुमोलिना पितृपदे नमः ओम पितृआदेश सोणशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः ओम तपोमयाय नमः ओम उदासीनाय नमः ओम महायोगिने नमः ओम महोत्साहाय नमः ओम कुशाग्रतीये नमः ओम शांत संकल्प संप्रभाय नमः ओम सुसुंदृते नमः ओम सवित्रे नमः ओम स्थिराय नमः ओम तपस्वीद सर्वंगाय नमः ओम पुल्लांबुज विलोचनाय नमः। ओम चंद्रिकासिदास श्री पंडितानिल मंडलाय नमः। ओम सूदवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः। ओम सूर्यदाग्र विप्रमाय नमः। ओम वेद वेदांत तत्पज्ञाय नमः। ओम चिन्मुद्रे नमः। ओम त्रिगुणाधिकाय नमः। ओम विरूपाक्ष गुहावासाय नमः। ओम विराजत सलाकृतिये नमः। ओम उद्दीप्त नयनाय नमः। ओम पूर्णाय नमः। ओम रसिदासतांडवाय नमः। ओम गंभीराय नमः। ओम परमाचार्याय नमः। ओम सुप्रसन्याय नमः। ओम अभयप्रदाय नमः। ओम दक्षिणाधिनिवाय नमः। ओम धीराय नमः। ओम दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ओम स्वराजे नमः। ओम मगरीये नमः। ओम भगवते नमः। ओम ईत्याय नमः। ओम भूमविद्या विशारदाय नमः। ओम विमलाय नमः। ओम दीर्घदर्शने नमः। ओम आप्ताय नमः। ओम ऋजमार्ग प्रदर्शकाय नमः। ओम समदृशे नमः। ओम सत्यदृशे नमः। ओम सत्याय नमः। ओम प्रशांताय नमः। ओम अमित विक्रमाय नमः। ओम सुकुमाराय नमः। ओम सदानंदाय नमः। ओम मृदुवाचिने नमः। ओम दयार्णवाय नमः। ओम श्री सोणासुरयुरुद्भूत स्कंदासुर निकेतनाय नमः। ओम सप्तर्षणोपदेष्टने नमः। ओम सत्भक्त वृंद परिवृताय नमः। ओम गणेश मुनि प्रिंगेन सेविताग्रसरोरुवाय नमः। ओम गीतोपदेश सारा ग्रंथ संसिन्न संशयाय नमः। ओम वर्णाश्रमदादीनाय नमः। ओम रसज्ञाय नमः। ओम सौम्याय नमः। ओम आत्मवते नमः। ओम सर्वापरिमदत्तान महाराध्याय नमः। ओम सर्वसत्कुलिने नमः। ओम आत्मारामाय नमः। ओम महाभागाय नमः। ओम मातृमुक्तिविदायकाय नमः। ओम विनदाय नमः। ओम विनुदाय नमः। ओम विप्राय नमः। ओम मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ओम भावगोज्वलाय नमः। ओम दर्शनार्थक संवारिणे नमः। ओम गौरेण स्वप्नबोधकाय नमः। ओम निर्जातिकर्ता नित्याय नमः। ओम प्रणात्मोचकाय नमः। ओम अंतस्वीर चंडांशवे नमः। ओम संसारार्पतारकाय नमः। ओम सोणादिष्टरे नमः। ओम आर्तविद्या प्रकाशकाय नमः। ओम अविच्युत निज प्रज्ञाय नमः। ओम नैसर्गिक महातपसे नमः। ओम कमंडलधराय नमः। ओम सुब्रगोपी नमस्नाय नमः। ओम कुवाय नमः। ओम दंडवाणीये नमः। ओम कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ओम पवरोग पिशक्पराय नमः। ओम स्कंदाय नमः। ओम देवतमाय नमः। ओम अमर्त्याय नमः। ओम सेनानिये नमः। ओम पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री कात्याय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री पुरगाय वल्ली देवाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री सुब्रमण्याय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री स्वामीनाथने नमः। नमो भगवते श्री दक्षिणामूर्तिये नमः। नमो भगवते श्री नटराजने नमः। नमो भगवते श्री भैरवरे नमः। नमो भगवते श्री नंदी महेश्वराय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री शिव पार्वतीये नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। Let us all recite Upadesha Sara. Katuragaya prapade palam karma kimbaram karma dajjanam krihiti mahutado padana karanam paramasashvatam gajani bhojanam ishwararpitam nechayakritam चित्तशोधकं मुक्तिसाधकं कायवाङ्मनः कार्यमुत्तमं भूजनं जप चिन्तनं क्रमा जगतैषधी युक्तसेवनम् अष्टमूर्तिभिर्देवपूजनं उत्तमस्तवा दुच्चमन्दद सिद्धजं जप ध्यानमुत्तमम् आद्यधारया श्रोतसासमम् सरलचिन्तनम् विरततपरम् भेदभावना सौवमित्यसौ भावनाभिता भावनीमता भावशून्यस भावसुष्ठुरी भावना बला भक्तिरुत्तमा इरुस्थले मन स्वस्थता क्रिया भक्तियोगो वाचनिश्चितम् वायुरोदना दीयते मन जालभक्षिव रोदसावनम् सिद्धवायः सिद्धयायुता अत्मयोगिनी शक्तिमूलका ललितानने उभयरोदने लयकदं पुनः भवति नो मृगम् प्राणबन्धना लीनमानसम् एकचिन्तना नासमेत्यद नष्टमानसो गृष्टयोगिनः कृत्यमस्ति किम् स्वस्तिदं यद दृश्यवारिदं सिद्धमात्मनः चित्तदर्शनं तत्त्वदर्शनं मानसं तुगिं मार्गणीकृते नैव मानसं मार्गार्जवात् वृद्धयस्वहं वृत्तिमाश्रिता वृद्धयो मनो विद्यहं मनः अमयं कुतो भवति चिन्वद ऐपदत्यहं निजविचारणम् अहमिनाकवा अहमहं दया स्फुरतिरस्वयं परमपूर्णस इदमहं वदा अभिज्ञमन्वहम् अहमिलीनके अव्यक्तसत्तया विक्रयेन्द्रिया प्राणनीतमा नाममेकत तज्जडं सत सत्त्वभासिका चित्त्ववेदरा सद्दया इति चिद्दयायहम् ईशजीवयो वेशति विदा सस्वभावतो वस्तु केवलम् वेशानद स्वात्मदर्शनम् ईशदर्शनम् स्वात्मरूपत आत्मसंस्थिति स्वात्मदर्शनम् आत्मनिर्भया आत्मनिष्ठता ज्ञानवर्जिता अज्ञानहीनची ज्ञानमस्ति किम् ज्ञानुमन्तरम् किं स्वरूपमे आत्मदर्शने अव्यया भव पूर्णसिद्धुगम् बन्धमुक्त्यदि तम्बरं सुगम् विन्दनीयै वस्तुतैविद आमवेदगम् निजविभानगम् महति तं तपो रमणवाक्यम् महति तं तपो रमणवाक्यम् महति तं तपो रमणवाक्यम् अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय
Hari Om. Am I audible? Anuragji is not able to join right now because of some technical issue. So if I'm audible, if one of you can respond, I shall continue the satsang on self-inquiry.
Yes, you're audible.
Yes, okay,
You're
thank
audible.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll start today's satsang, where we were discussing and carefully studying Bhagavan's work, Vichara Sangraham or self-inquiry. We'll start with the Shanti Mantra. Vande Shri Ramanarsheh Acharyasya Padabjam Yo me Darshayadisham Bhantam Dhvantamatitya. Welcome to this satsang. So a small recap of what we studied in the last session, since it's been a while since we picked up the thread. So self-inquiry is one of the earliest works of Bhagavan, and they constitute his handwritten answers to the questions asked by Gambhiram Seshaya, a very old and long-time devotee of Bhagavan. So these questions are very diverse. They answer questions about not only self-inquiry, but also the context in which this whole practice takes place. So many other sadhanas are also referred to and answered by Bhagavan. What is noteworthy here is that all of Bhagavan's answers are based on the questioner in front of him. You know, in English, you use the word ad hominem. Ad hominem is not always a positive word, but it means it depends on the questioner. So the same question coming from a different person will elicit a slightly different answer because it has to address the deeper question in that person. And so Bhagavan was not stuck with just the literal superficial meaning of the words. He would answer keeping in view the adhikaritvam, the state of mind and the intent of the questioner. So with this, if we look at these diverse questions addressed in self-inquiry, we understand how there are different sadhakas with different dispositions. And Bhagavan never invalidated any of the other practices. The core practice of self-inquiry, of course, is what it is. And at the same time, many of the auxiliary practices, including mantra repetition, all of them are validated by Bhagavan. They're not looked upon with condescension. Oh, they are inferior. Not so. Because what is a medicine for me may not be a medicine for someone else. So that doesn't mean I have to take somebody else's medicine. So I need to look for what works for me. And so in that spirit, Bhagavan has answered these questions in self-inquiry, this work. And like I said, the original was in Tamil. And a very great scholar, Sri T.M.P. Mahadevan, translated that original Tamil word to word, very closely following that Tamil into English, which is what we are carefully studying in this session. So we will continue from where we left off in the last session. In the last session, the question raised by the student or by the devotee was about the nature of self-inquiry. And he asks, how is one to inquire, who am I? How is one to inquire, who am I? And Bhagavan goes on in various ways to explain that this body is inert. He says, can this body, which is inert like a log of wood, be said to shine as I? So not so, says Bhagavan. He says, therefore, the I consciousness, which at first arises in respect of the body, is referred to variously as self-conceit, tarbodham, ego-iti, ahankara, nations, avidya, maya, impurity, mala, individual soul, jiva. So all these words are to make sense of our experience. Remember, the Guru in his vision has Advaita. He's established in Advaita. He's not going to come and say, you have avidya. So he's not going to come and say, there is this world out here. It is we or the student who say to the Guru, well, I experience this, I experience dukkha, I experience diversity, duality. How do I make sense of it, out of it? How do I get to freedom from limitation? So then the Guru comes down to the level of the student or the devotee, and he only does anuvada. Anuvada is taking on a stance for the sake of uplifting the devotee or student. It doesn't actually represent the last word. It's not the Guru's own vision. But if the Guru were to just stay in his own abidance, then the student is left in the air. He's not able to really connect with the Guru. And therefore, Bhagavan says all these are there, no doubt, which make that I shine in the body, as it were. The body is technically what we call it the upadhi. So that very eye shines, he says, in respect of the body, and is referred to in various ways. So many labels are there for that very eye shining with the upadhi of the body. Is it not for our redemption? Can we remain without inquiring into this, says Bhagavan? In other words, once we know that this body is inert, at the same time, I am conscious, I am aware. So surely this body is not I. So then what is I? That's a natural consequence of even rudimentary examination of our experience. Note how Bhagavan doesn't try to say you must get some new experience, some extraordinary experience. That's not really the approach of Bhagavan or other acharyas here. We are instead asked to just very open-mindedly, very carefully, with a sukshma, subtle buddhi, examine our own existing experience as it is. So that path of self-inquiry, therefore, doesn't rely on getting an experience. This experience mongering is a big trip. And Bhagavan is careful not to encourage that kind of seeking some experiences, because that I is nitya siddha, it is ever evident. So Bhagavan says, can we be without inquiring into this existing experience of what we already are, what we see as the body? And then we see that I am conscious, the body is not. So we will naturally inquire, says Bhagavan. And then he goes on to say, is it not for our redemption through inquiry that all the scriptures declare that the destruction of self-conceit is release? Therefore, making the corpse body remain as a corpse, not even uttering the word I, one should inquire keenly thus. Now, what is it that arises as I? Then there would shine in the heart a kind of wordless illumination in the form I. That is, there would shine of its own accord the pure consciousness which is unlimited and one, the limited and the many thoughts having disappeared. So this is the essence of the path, that pure consciousness is unlimited and one. And one arrives at that which is ever there by merely disidentifying with all these thoughts. Constantly these thoughts are coming up, drawing us away from ourselves, as it were. So all one has to do is rest in that pure being. And so Bhagavan then expands on that very path. But for now, what he's saying, note, is to keep the corpse body remain as a corpse. It's a memory of or a recollection of what Bhagavan himself practiced in that moment, in those few moments in Madurai, where he experienced a certain inwardness, and as a result of that, he was able to arrive at that self-knowledge. So that inwardness which Bhagavan practiced there, we can use the word practice because there was a small time element, no doubt, there, where Bhagavan lay down as a corpse and went within, and in a wordless illumination, that very true nature of the self emerged or flashed. Bhagavan was, of course, an extraordinary enlightened being. He was just having, as it were, a certain mission possibly to fulfill here. And so we cannot just imitate that blindly. However, there is a certain important aspect here of allowing the body to be and then trying to go within. So Bhagavan here says that initially, it's not very easy to practice self-inquiry amidst all one's actions. So if someone says, okay, I'll try to practice, or I'll practice self-inquiry while doing whatever I'm doing, while fulfilling all the roles that I'm fulfilling, well, best of luck. It's in principle possible, but then in practice, one has to first acquire that depth in self-inquiry, making the body sit like a corpse, as Bhagavan says. In other words, still, not getting into all bodily actions and the different things you do with one's body. So that stillness with respect to the body is an important initial prerequisite. After once having that depth in self-inquiry, after having gained a certain insight, aham spurana as it were, yes, one could then look upon these various activities in your life as a challenge, and then try and see if that abidance continues amidst all the roles that one plays. So that's next. But one cannot put the cart before the horse. One has to first quieten down, sit still, as Bhagavan says, like a corpse, and then practice this self-inquiry. And another important aspect here is that there would shine of its own accord that pure consciousness which is unlimited and one. So notice how Bhagavan is not just leaving us hanging, saying, practice self-inquiry and then let's see what happens. He doesn't altogether leave us hanging like that. He no doubt puts it as a question because we don't want another verbal answer for that. We have a number of verbal answers to who am I or what am I. So Bhagavan doesn't want us to get lost in these words and concepts. At the same time, Bhagavan is not encouraging us to get into a speculative pursuit. He's making it very clear that that wordless illumination of the which is unlimited and one. So all these words are very deep words which we have to carefully look at. That consciousness is one. It doesn't admit of a counterpart. If you say consciousness and something else, well, that something else is in consciousness. That something else has no existence apart from consciousness. All that is implicit when Bhagavan says unlimited and one consciousness, that as a wordless illumination arises. So therefore, in self-inquiry, this wordless illumination, which later on Bhagavan calls aham spurana, that is to arise. So it's not an experience, remember, it's more a resolution of the mind. So all experiences are at the mental realm. Here we are taking a step back from identifying with the mind, allowing the mind to subside. In practice, this may take a while, this may take a few minutes, if maybe even an hour or so in practice. And once a person develops that skill, that insight, perhaps it may be much less, it may be very spontaneous. But initially, one has to give oneself that little time. We have to give ourselves that opportunity to go within, go deeper. And when I say go deeper, it means we disengage from the various roles we play. We disengage from the stories we build about ourselves. Bhagavan says, whenever thoughts come, just disengage. Who or what am I? Instead of getting into the content of those thoughts and losing one's thread of self-inquiry. So all that is implicit here. So I will read again that particular very important line. There would shine in the heart a kind of wordless illumination in the form of I. That is, there would shine of its own accord that pure consciousness which is unlimited and one. Traditionally, we use the word Ananta and Advitiyam. So that Ananta and Advitiya Chaitanyam is arrived at. It is always present, but is never recognized. Here, that recognition of what I am happens, no doubt, as a glimpse. But nevertheless, that's a big breakthrough in one's journey. And the limited and the many thoughts having disappeared. So these thoughts which we regularly have come laden with the roles we play. They come laden with identifying with something or the other, planning about the future, recollecting the past. There is a narrative which we have, a story which we tell ourselves about ourselves. So these thoughts which come, which keep coming, are about the story we have of ourselves. It's like reliving our biography, which is utterly unreal in the ultimate analysis. So we keep reliving that biography. Oh, all these happened to me. This is going to happen to me. So we keep reliving that over and over again. And therefore, that gets in the way of merely abiding as aham, that Shuddha Chaitanyam. So that is what Bhagavan says, the many thoughts having disappeared. So all these roles and the stories we tell us ourselves about ourselves are set aside, no doubt, at least temporarily. Then Bhagavan goes on to say, if one remains quiescent without abandoning that experience, the egoity, the individual sense of the form, I am the body, will be totally destroyed. And at the end, the final thought, the I form, will also be quenched like the fire that burns camphor. The great sages and scriptures declare that this alone is release. So, working again backwards, you can see how Bhagavan is aligning totally with the tradition of the great sages and scriptures. So it's not as if this is, a new make-believe, new age path that Bhagavan is talking about. It's the very same path of Advaita set forth by the great sages and scriptures, but cast in a way that is very amenable to the modern mind, in a way that's very relatable for a modern mind. So Bhagavan's uniqueness is that out of his compassion, he was able to draw out that essence from all the sayings and the teachings of the sages in the scriptures, presented to us in a way that you and I can relate and directly practice, get the benefit of self-inquiry. But it's nothing to be told as a new age thing. This new age is an extremely dubious thing sometimes. Anyone comes up with anything and says, well, this is my discovery, this is my discovery. So Bhagavan is careful never to say, this is my discovery. Bhagavan always says that this is born of direct insight which he has, but it is that which is taught by the great sages and scriptures. It's not different. It's important to do that samanvaya, that reconciliation there. So here again, Bhagavan says, therefore, that I illumination also is like a thought, a special thought, if you like, which removes all the other thoughts. All the other habitual identifications are gradually weakened. So it's like how you might take an axe to cut, let's say, a harmful tree or a harmful thorny bush. So you take an axe and keep chopping the tree. So you don't have to do anything new and different. That same vritti, the I illumination, the hamsfarana or the brahmakara vritti, whichever word we use for that, that merely coming back to that vritti repeatedly weakens all the other vrittis, all the other identifications, all our other assumptions we have about ourselves. So that's a very powerful tool hitting at the very root of avidya or self-ignorance. That is why Bhagavan says that I am the body sense will be totally destroyed, and then that very vritti has done its job. You don't need the axe. After the tree which is to be cut is destroyed, that thorny bush is removed, the axe is set aside. Even so, here Bhagavan gives the example of camphor. Camphor, a fire of camphor will burn the other things and finally is quenched, is sublimated into nothingness. It's no longer needed, it just resolves of its own accord. So that is the summary of this who am I path. So as you can see, there is much to ponder, much to dwell upon in all this, and the whole self-inquiry treatise talks about that in detail. So we'll then continue this study here. So then the disciple asks the next question. When one inquires into the root of this self-conceit, remember the word self-conceit is used to refer to the ahankara or the limited I sense which each of us has. That is the self-conceit. So when one inquires into the root of self-conceit, which is of the form of I, all sorts of different thoughts without number seem to rise, and not any separate I thought. So this is an important question, because Bhagavan is known to say, and many of us would know that, the I thought is at the root of all the other thoughts. And so therefore, if you inquire into that, the other thoughts are effectively resolved or done away with. So, but the questioner here says, what is this I thought? I don't experience any I thought separately. It's just that all sorts of different thoughts without number seem to arise. And there's no separate I thought, isn't it? Says the disciple. So Bhagavan here answers the question saying that whether the nominative case, which is the first case, appears or not, the sentences in which the other cases appear have as their basis the first case. Similarly, all the thoughts that appear in the heart have as their basis the egoity, which is the first mental mode, I, the cognition of the form I am the body. Thus, it is the rise of egoity that is the cause and source of the rise of all the other thoughts. So we will break it at that point, and then Bhagavan gives the reason therefore. So Bhagavan basically says that, I'll explain this, then we can reread that. In Sanskrit, any sentence has something called the subject, who is put in the nominative case. If I were to say, I go there, aham tatra gacchami. So I is the subject, and going is the verb, and there is the object. Or if you say, I eat food, or he eats food, saha bhojanam khadati. Saha is the subject, bhojanam is the object, khadati is the act of eating. Now, in Sanskrit, as also perhaps in many other languages, the subject is sometimes not explicitly mentioned. For example, you can tell somebody, shut the door. So when you say shut the door, it implies you shut the door. The you is implied, it's not explicitly told there. Or you can say eat food, eat the food. Bhojanam khadasva or khada. So bhojanam khada implies eat the food. But you is not present. The subject is not explicitly present in many Sanskrit sentences. But it is implied, says Bhagavan. When the nominative case, which is the first case, the subject, appears or not, even if it is not present, it is implied. It is inherent in all the sentences. And all the other cases otherwise don't have any ground to stand on. If you don't say, you shut the door, if that you is not implied, who's going to shut the door? To whom is the sentence addressed to? So without implying the word you, saying shut the door doesn't make any sense. I can't just say shut the door to a wall. So you shut the door is implied, even when I just say shut the door, eat food. So like that, Bhagavan says that this I thought is implied in all the other thoughts. We may not notice it, but it is implicit. It is what gives the basis for every other thought. If I is not there, who owns up all the thoughts? Who derives or gives the continuity for all the thoughts? So that is why Bhagavan says that all the thoughts that appear in the heart have as their basis the egoity. Basis in Sanskrit is adhishtanam. So all the other vrittis are or thoughts have the adhishtanam in the form of this aham. The egoity, which is the first mental mode, the cognition of the form I am the body. So that I is already implicitly connected with the body. If you are familiar with the general word used, we say chit jada granthi. So I, consciousness, and jada, the body, that granthi, that connection, which is avidya, is already implied in every experience, in every other thought. So that is what Bhagavan says, that the cognition of the form I am the body is already implied there, the first mental mode. Thus, it is the rise of egoity. Okay, this mental mode is the egoity that is the cause and source of the rise of all the other thoughts. Elsewhere, Bhagavan uses the word adhara shruti. So, in all the notes, the shruti is implicit. Even if the sa is not present in every other note, as the raga is improvised, still the shruti is implied. It is recognized even through all the other notes. Elsewhere, Bhagavan gives that analogy. So here too, therefore, that ahankara or egoity, which is the root, that is the source and cause of all the other thoughts. So in our own direct way, we can also perceive this. See, whenever any thought comes, the thinker I is implicit. Otherwise, how will you own up all the thoughts that I thought of this, I thought of that yesterday, I ate this yesterday, I experienced that yesterday, I did this, or that I is implied in every single thought and action. The sense of agency, that also implies the I. No doubt that I, if you investigate it, it's not another object. And that is the big mystery. That's what the whole self-inquiry path is telling you or leading you through. But no doubt initially we have to accept that egoity, the I thought, is present in and through every single other thought and experience. Without that, there is no continuity. There is no narrative there. Yeah. So then Bhagavan goes on to say, if the self-conceit in the form of egoity. The word egoity, remember, is the same I thought. Okay. So there are so many words. Remember, just think of it as two. There is a pure I, Shuddha Chaitanyam. That very I has an avatara, has as it were a first manifestation called I thought. Okay, just two things. That I thought is called egoity or jiva or ahankara, different words to refer to the same I thought, which is the first manifestation or modification, as it were, of that pure I. So Bhagavan then says, if the self-conceit of the form of egoity, which is the root of the illusory tree of samsara, is destroyed, all the other thoughts will perish completely like an uprooted tree. So even as a tree has many branches and flowers and leaves, but if a person cuts it at the very root, then the tree falls and dries up, gets destroyed. Even so, this I thought, if it is made to resolve through the right understanding, through self-knowledge, as of the very nature of I, pure, unlimited Chaitanyam, as Bhagavan earlier said, then all its other manifestations in the form of the other thoughts and identifications, they all come to an end. The avidya comes to an end. And so then Bhagavan says, all the other thoughts will perish completely like an uprooted tree. Whatever thoughts arise as obstacles to one's sadhana, the mind should not be allowed to go in their direction, but should be made to rest in oneself, which is the Atman. One should remain as a witness to whatever happens, adopting the attitude, let whatever strange things happen, happen. Let us see. This should be one's practice. In other words, one should not identify oneself with appearances. One should never relinquish one's self. This is the proper means for the destruction of mind, which is of the nature of seeing the body as self, and which is the cause of all the aforesaid obstacles. So the destruction of mind is manonasha. So Bhagavan says the proper means for this manonasha is manonasha. The mana here refers to seeing the body as oneself. That ignorance is what is referred to here as manaha. It's not as if the mind inherently is an entity and one has to destroy it. It's not the body that is the problem. Identification with the body is the problem. A jnani doesn't destroy the body. Similarly, he doesn't destroy the mind, literally speaking. Right? So sometimes a misconception. The word manonasha is to be understood as destruction of identifying with the body and mind. That identification gets destroyed. The body and mind are harmless. They're like trees and the houses and the bricks and the walls. So we don't have to destroy all these things. But the identification with that is a source of misery. It is anyway false. That is destroyed. So manonasha refers to that. Because ultimately all this too arises from that identification. Because of that identification alone, one projects this whole samsara, this whole multifarious universe for oneself, and then one plays in it. So that is why manonasha, we have to very carefully notice, it is not an actual physical destruction of some entity. Because if you destroy something, it will again come up in another form. Instead, it is recognizing I am never the mind. I was never the mind. I will never be the mind. So it's not something that is an event. Is to recognize I was never the mind in the first place. The mind, the body, this world, they have their play, all right, but I am what I am. So manonasha, therefore, Bhagavan here clarifies, it is of the nature of seeing the body as the self. That is the manaha. And that nasha happens of that notion, that deep-rooted avidya. That is the cause of all the aforesaid obstacles, says Bhagavan. Then he goes on to say, this method, which easily destroys egoity, deserves to be called devotion, bhakti, meditation, dhyana, concentration, yoga, and knowledge, jnana. Because God remains of the nature of the self, shining as I in the heart. Because the scriptures declare that thought itself is bondage. The best discipline is to stay quiescent without forgetting him meaning God or the self. After resolving in him the mind, which is of the form of the I thought, no matter by what means. This is the conclusive teaching of the scriptures. So Bhagavan repeatedly, you can see, says that what the scriptures are saying is not any different from what I am saying here. Pay attention, because when you're face to face with a jnani, you should not go and say this scripture says that, that scripture says that. it's utterly meaningless to talk like that. The Jnani's words are the scripture. So one has to open oneself and wholeheartedly listen and absorb the vision of the master, which is why Bhagavan sometimes says, relax, let the scriptures say what they have to say. Tell me, what do you say about yourself? He tries to make you present right there instead of getting lost in intellectual games and speculation. So therefore, the very words of the Jnani embody the scriptures, and they are totally aligned with the scriptures as well. So Bhagavan therefore says that the best discipline, therefore, is to be quiescent without forgetting him. The forgetting here implies that one is not lost in the thoughts and all the other roles. Instead, that aham sphurana, that brahmakara vritti, becomes the basis for one's sadhana. So one tries to always draw one's attention to that, doesn't lose sight of that. That itself is the nididhyasanam or self-inquiry. Okay. So for those who are familiar with the word nididhyasanam, remember, atma vichara and nididhyasanam are just synonyms. There is no daylight between these two. For one who has understood both of them, there is no daylight between nididhyasanam and atma vichara as explained by Bhagavan. So after resolving in him, Ishvara or the self, that mind which is of the form of the I thought, no matter by what means, one remains abiding there. This is the conclusive teaching of the scriptures, says Bhagavan. So that is the conclusion. So with this, maybe today's class we will stop here because the session started a little late. So next session we will continue here. And I think Anurag ji is unable to join today due to some technical reason. I'll see if he has been able to come back online. No. So we will end here, and I request Narayan ji to start his Akshara Manamali if he is there. And we will end with the Shanti mantra here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Namaste, dear Raghavji. Thank you very much. It was wonderful to have you back doing the Sunday Satsang for the Delhi Kendra. On behalf of Anurag and the rest of us at the Kendra, very happy and welcome. And thank you very much for your discourse today. Thank you.
I request Narayan ji to commence the Aksharamana Mala if it is possible. Okay, so I will start the Aksharamana Mala from my end, and we can follow.
Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. Arunachala ahame ninai pavarahatai verarpai Arunachala அழகு சுந்தரம் போலகமும் நீயும் அபிந்தமாயிருப்போம் அருணாச்சலா அகம் புகுந்தீர்த்து உன் அழகு ஐசிறையார் அமர்வித்ததென் கொல்லருணாச்சலா ஆறு காவனையாண்டனை அகற்றிடில் அகிலம் வழித்திடும் அருணாச்சலா இப்பழித்த புனையே நினை பேத்தார் இனி யார் விடுவார் அருணாச்சலா. ஈன்றிடும் மன்னையிற் பெரிதருள் புரிபோய் இதுவோ உனதருள் அருணாச்சலா. உனையே மாற்றி ஓடாதுளத்தின் மேல் உறுதியாயிருப்பாய் அருணாச்சலா. ஓர் சோற்றுளம் விடாதுனை கண்டடங்கிட உன்னழகை காட்டருணாச்சலா. என்னை அழித்தே போதெனை கலவாவிடில் இதுவோ ஆண்மை அருணாச்சலா. ஏன் இந்த உறக்கம் என்னை பிறரிழுக்க இது உனக்கழகோ அருணாச்சலா. ஐம்புல கள்வர் அகத்தினில் புகும்போதகத்தினி இளையோ அருணாச்சலா. ஒருவன முன்னை ஒளித்தவர் வருவார் உன் சோதே இது அருணாச்சலா. ஓங்கார பொருள் ஒப்புயர்வில்லோய் உனையார் அறிவார் அருணாச்சலா. ஔவை போல் எனக்கு உன்னருளை தந்தனை ஆளுவதுன் கடன் அருணாச்சலா. கண்ணுக்கு கண்ணாய் கண்ணின்றி காணுனை காணுவதெவர்பார் அருணாச்சலா. காந்தமிரும்பு போல் கவர்ந்தெனை விடாமல் கலந்தென்னோடிருப்பாய் அருணாச்சலா. கிரி குருவாகிய கிருபை கடலே கிருபை கூர்ந்தருளுவாய் அருணாச்சலா. கீழ்மேலெங்கும் கிளரொளி மணியன் கீழ்மையை பாழ் செய் அருணாச்சலா. குற்றமுற்றரு தென்னை குணமாய் பணித்தாள் குரு குருவாயொளிர் அருணாச்சலா. வாழ்கண்ணியர் கொடுமையில் படாதருள் கூர்ந்தனை சேர்ந்தருள் அருணாச்சலா. கெஞ்சியும் வஞ்சியாய் கொஞ்சமும் இறங்கிலை அஞ்சலென்றே அருள் அருணாச்சலா. கேடாதளிக்கும் முன் கேடில் புகழை கேடு செய்யாதருள் அருணாச்சலா. கையினிற்கனி உன் மீரசம் கொண்டு வகை வெறி கொள அருணாச்சலா. கொடியேட்டடியரை கொல்லுனை கட்டி கொண்டெங்கன் வாழ்வேன் அருணாச்சலா. கோமபில் குணத்தோய் குறியாய் என்னை கொள்ள குறையன் செய்தேன் அருணாச்சலா. கௌதமர் போற்றும் கருணை மாமலையே கடை கணி தாழ்வாய் அருணாச்சலா. சகலமும் விளங்கும் கதிரொளி இனமன ஜல ஜமலத்தே அருணாச்சலா. சாப்பாடுன்னை சாந்துணவாயான் சாந்தமாய் போவன் அருணாச்சலா. சேத்தம் குளிர கதிர் ஹஸ்தம் வைத்த முதவாயை திற அருள்மதி அருணாச்சலா. சீரையழித்த நிர்வாணமா செய்தருள் சீரையழித்தருள் அருணாச்சலா. சுகக்கடல் பொங்க சொல்லுணர்வடங்க சும்மா பொருந்திடன் கருணாச்சலா. சோத செய்தென்னை சோதியாதினி உன் ஜோதியொரு காட்டருணாச்சலா. ஜெப்படி வேத்தை கற்றி படி மயக்க விட்டூறு படுவித்தை காட் அருணாச்சலா சேராய நின்மை நீராய் உருகி கண்ணீராய் கழிவேன் அருணாச்சலா செய்யன தள்ளு செய்வினை சுடுமலால் உய்வகையே துரை அருணாச்சலா சொல்லாத சொல்லி நீ சொல்லரனில் என்று சும்மாயிருந்தாய் அருணாச்சலா சோம்பியாய் சும்மா சுகமுண்டுறங்கிடு சொல்வேரெங்கதி அருணாச்சலா ஓரியங்காட்டினை சழக்கற்றதென்றே சலியாதிருந்தாய் அருணாச்சலா ஞமலிய கேடா நானென்னுருதியா நாடி நின்னுருவே அருணாச்சலா ஞானமில்லாது உன்னாசையார் தளர்வர ஞானம் தெரே தருள் அருணாச்சலா நிமிரு போல் நீயும் மலர்ந்தில்லை என்றே நின்றனையன் அருணாச்சலா தத்துவம் தெரியாதனையூற்றாய் தத்துவம் இது என் அருணாச்சலா தானே தானே தத்துவமிதனை தானே காட்டுவாய் அருணாச்சலா திரும்பிய அந்தனை தினமாக கண்காண் தெரியும் என்றன என் அருணாச்சலா தீரமிலகத்தில் தேடி முந்தன யான் திரும்ப உற்றேன் அருணாச்சலா தொப்பறிவில்லாயே பிறப்பெண் பயம் ஒப்பிடவாயே அருணாச்சலா தூய் மனமொழிய தோயும் முன்னையகம் தோயவே அருணன் அருணாச்சலா தெய்வமென்றுன்னை சாரவே என்னை சேர ஒழித்தாய் அருணாச்சலா தேடாதோற்றனல் திரு அருள் நிதியாக தியகம் தீர்த்தரு அருணாச்சலா தைரியமோடு உன்னையக நாடைய தட்டழிந்தேன் அருள் அருணாச்சலா தொட்டருட்டை மே கட்டிடாய நிலிய நஷ்டமாவே அருள் அருணாச்சலா தோடமில் நீயாக தோடொன்று என்று சந்தோஷம் ஒன்றிட அருள் அருணாச்சலா நகை கிடமிலை நின் நாடிய என அருள் நகையிட்டு பாரி அருணாச்சலா நானிலை நாடிட நானாயொன்றி நீ தானுவாய் நின்றனை அருணாச்சலா நின்னெறியறித்தனை நீராக்கிட முன் நின்னருள் மழை பொழி அருணாச்சலா நீனானரப்புலி நிதங்களிமயமா நின்றிடு நிலையருள் அருணாச்சலா நுண்ணுரு உனையான் விண்ணுரு நன்னிட எண்ணலை இருமென் அருணாச்சலா மூலறிவறியா பேதையன் எந்தன் மாலறிவருத்தருள் அருணாச்சலா நெக்கு நெக்குருகியான் புக்கிட உனை புகழ் நக்கனான் என்றனை அருணாச்சலா நேசமில் எனக்கு உன் ஆசையை காட்டி நீ மோசம் செய்யா தருள் அருணாச்சலா தைந்தழி கனியால் நலநிலை பதத்தில் நாடி உட்கொள் நலம் அருணாச்சலா நொந்திடாதும் தன்னை தந்தனை கொண்டில்லை அந்த கண்ணி என கருணாச்சலா நோக்கிய கருதிமை தாக்கிய பக்குவமாக்கினி ஆண்டரும் அருணாச்சலா. பற்றிமால் விஷம் தலையோற்றிருமுணமருள் பற்றிட அருள் புரி அருணாச்சலா. பார்த்தருள் மாலர பார்த்திலையெனின் அருள் பாருணக்கார் சொல்வர் அருணாச்சலா. பேத்த வெட்டுனை நேர்பிகனாகினை அருள் பேத்தம் தெளி மறந்தருணாச்சலா. பீதியில் உனை சார் பீதியில் என்னை சேர் பீதி ஒன்றனக்கே அருணாச்சலா. உள்ளறிவே துரை நல்லறிவே துரை புள்ளிடவே அருள் அருணாச்சலா. பூமண மாமணம் பூரண மணம் கொள்ள பூரண மணம் அருள் அருணாச்சலா. நினைத்திடவே பிடித்திழுத்தனை உன் பெருமையார் அறிவார் அருணாச்சலா. பேய்தனம் விட விடா பேயா பிடித்தனை பேயனாக்கினை என் அருணாச்சலா. பைங்கொடியா நான் பற்றென்றி வாடாமல் பற்று கொடாய்கா அருணாச்சலா. பொடியால் மயக்கியன் போதத்தை பறித்து உன் போதத்தை காட்டினை அருணாச்சலா. போக்கும் வரவுமில் பொது வெளியினில் அருள் போராட்டங்காட்டருணாச்சலா. பௌதிகமாமுடற்பற்று நாளும் உத்பவிசு கண்டுர அருள் அருணாச்சலா. மலை மருந்திட நீ மலைந்திடவோ அருள் மலை மறுத்தாயொளி அருணாச்சலா. மான கொண்டுருபவர் மானத்தை அழித்த அபிமானமில்லாதொளிர் அருணாச்சலா. மெஞ்சிடற்கெஞ்சிடும் கொஞ்ச அருளெனை அருணாச்சலா. மீகாமனில்லாமல் மாகாற்றலை கலம் ஆகாமல் காத்தருணாச்சலா. முடியடி காணா முடிவிட தனை நேர் முடிவிட கடனில்லை அருணாச்சலா. மூக்கிலன் முன்காட்டு முகுரமகாலனை தூக்கி அணைந்தருள் அருணாச்சலா. மெய்யகத்தின் மனமென் மலரடையில் நம்மை கலத்திட அருள் அருணாச்சலா. மேன்மேல் தாழ்ந்திடும் மெல்லியர் சேர்ந்தனி மேன்மையுற்றனையன் அருணாச்சலா. மைமய நீ தருள் மையினால் உனது உண்மை வசமாக்கினை அருணாச்சலா. மொட்டையடே தெனை வெட்ட வெளியில் நீ நட்டமாடினையன் அருணாச்சலா. மோகம் தவேர்த்து உன் மோகம் அவைத்துமென் மோகம் தீராயன் அருணாச்சலா. மௌனியாய் கல் போல் மலராதிருந்தால் மௌனமிதாமோ அருணாச்சலா. யவனின் வாயில் மண்ணினையட்டி என் பிழை பொழித்த அருணாச்சலா. யாரும் அறியாதென் மத்தி என்னை மருட்டியவர் கொலை கொண்ட அருணாச்சலா. ரமணன் என்றுரைத்தேன் ரோஷம் கொள்ளாதென ரமித்திட செய்யவா அருணாச்சலா. ராபகலில்லா பெருவெளி வீட்டில் ரமித்திடுவோம் வா அருணாச்சலா. லட்சியம் வைத்தருணஸ்திரம் வேட்டனை பக்ஷித்தாய் பிராணனோடு அருணாச்சலா. லாப நிகித பர லாபமில்லை உற்று லாபமெனோற்றனை அருணாச்சலா. வரும்படி சொல்லில்லை வந்தன் படியள வருந்திடும் தலை விதி அருணாச்சலா வாவென்றாம் பொன் வாழ்வருளன்றே என் வாழ்விழந்தேன் அருள் அருணாச்சலா வேட்டிடர் கஷ்டமாம் வேட்டிடாதுனை உயிர் வேட்டிட அருள் புரி அருணாச்சலா வீடு விட்டீர் துள விடுபுக்கு பைய உன் வீடு காட்டினை அருள் அருணாச்சலா வெளி விட்டேனும் செயல் வெறுத்திடாதுன் அருள் வெளி விட்டனை காருணாச்சலா வேதாந்தத்தே வேரற விளங்கும் வேத பொருள் அருள் அருணாச்சலா வைதலை வாழ்த்தா வைத்தருட்குடியா வைத்தனை விடாதருள் அருணாச்சலா அம்புவில் ஆலி போல் அன்புரு உனிலனை அன்பா கரை தருள் அருணாச்சலா அருணை என்றென்னையான் அருட்கண்ணில் பட்டேன் உன் அருள் வலை தப்புமோ அருணாச்சலா செந்தே தருள் பட சிலந்தி போல் காட்டி சிறையே தொண்டனை அருணாச்சலா அன்போடு நாமங்கள் அன்பர்தம் அன்பர் கண்பனாயிட அருள் அருணாச்சலா என் போலும் தீனரை இன்புற காத்து நீ என்னாலும் வாழ்ந்தருள் அருணாச்சலா என் பொருகன்பர்தம் இன் சொற்கொள் செவியுமென் உன்மொழி கொள அருணாச்சலா பொறுமயம் பூதர சொல்லை நன் சொல்ல பொறுத்தருளேஷ்டம் பின் அருணாச்சலா மாலையளே தருணாச்சல ரமணையின் மாலை அணிந்தருள் அருணாச்சலா மாலையளே தருணாச்சல ரமணையின் மாலை அணிந்தருள் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சலம் வாழி அன்பர்களும் வாழி அக்ஷரமண வாழி.
Om Narayanji, can you please take over?
ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा, ओम अवाहनाय स्वाहा, ओम ज्ञानाय स्वाहा, ओम उदानाय स्वाहा, ओम समानाय स्वाहा, ओम ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा. अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः, अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः, अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः. कात्याय मुरुगा वल्ली दैवानंद सुब्रह्मण्य स्वामीनाथ दक्षिणामूर्तिये नमः. नटराजा भैरवरे नंदिमैसराय शिव पार्वतीये नमः. उलगंड गोशीरम अनुदान नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि. मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि. अमृतोपिता सूत्रापोषं समर्पयामि. नीराजनं समर्पयामि. नीराजनानन्तरम् आसमनीयं समर्पयामि. ऊगीबल समाजं नागवल्ली तलेवरं कर्पूर्ण सुवर्णसं प्रसिद्धं कर्पूर नीराजनं श्री रमण महर्षिकी समर्पयामि. चलो मानसु परेण नाहं नीतं गुहायं विप्राजते सत्यदैवो विसन्ति वेदान्त विज्ञान से संन्यास योगा तदय शुद्ध सत्त्वाः ते ब्रह्मलोके तु परान्तकाले परामृतात् परिमुच्यन्ते सर्वे तारं विभावं परमेश्वरभूतं यत्पुण्डरीकं पुरमत्यसगुंसदम् तत्रावित्तकरमकगनं दिशोक तस्मिन् यदं तद्वादित्यं यो वेदान्तोऽसुरप्रोक्तो वेदान्तस्य प्रतिष्ठितः तस्य प्रकृतिलीनस्य परमेश्वरः मन्त्रपुष्पं समर्पयामि वर्णपुष्पं समर्पयामि ॐ तत्सवितुर्पार्वणमस्तु हरि ओम् हरि ओम् हरि ओम् हरि ओम् पदे पदे दक्षिणं गुरोमीशा यदाशनं नास्ति रमे वितरणं स्मात् कारुण्यभावेन रक्षरक्षदिवाकर रक्षदिवाकर நாராயணா தீர்த்தம்னா கொடுத்துருங்க பண்ணுவோம் வாங்க मंत्र भगवान जाने